Hey everybody, hope you're doing well. My name is Cody with Pocket Coach Academy, and I wanted to make a quick video on the Arctic Council counterplan, kind of outlining a little bit of background around the Arctic Council, and then also giving you a few tips and tricks for how to best run the counterplan when you're on the negative. So, for those that don't know, the Arctic Council is an intergovernmental forum that was created in 1996, and its goal is to promote cooperation, coordination, and interaction amongst Arctic states. It also includes some Arctic indigenous communities that have a say in the Arctic Council and have a seat in the Arctic Council, but don't have any voting rights. And the largest issues that the Arctic Council likes to take up are sustainable development and environmental protection in the Arctic. Now, you can see the member states listed here: Canada, Denmark, Finland, Iceland, Norway, Russia, Sweden, the United States. However, there are dozens of non-Arctic states, NGOs, and international organizations that have observer status and can contribute to the Arctic Council and be a part of the Arctic Council, but ultimately don't have any sort of voting power within the Arctic Council. Those would include countries like China, India, Japan, France, the United Kingdom, and also some NGO organizations like the European Union, the World Wildlife Federation, and the International Red Cross. Now, it's important to note that the Arctic Council is not a treaty-based organization like the UN or NATO, so it doesn't have the power to make binding laws or regulations, but instead it works by consensus, creating recommendations, performing assessments, and issuing guidelines that member states will often implement domestically on issues pertaining to the Arctic. Now, the council's work mainly focuses on, in the status quo, environmental protection, sustainable development for Arctic residents, scientific research and data sharing, and emergency prevention, preparedness, and response. And as of right now, it currently does not deal with any security concerns and has no forum for member states airing any security concerns regarding Arctic development, cooperation, or any sort of scientific endeavors in the Arctic. That has led, in short, to some credibility and influence wane over the past few years. The notion that the Arctic was a zone that was peaceful or non-confrontational cooperation could happen, what they experts would call Arctic exceptionalism, is increasingly viewed as a relic. More and more experts are arguing that geopolitical rivalries now sort of dominate the region, which makes a lot of cooperation almost impossible with the way that the Arctic Council is currently set up. And that's mainly because security concerns, previously excluded from the Council's mandate, are now unavoidable in discussions about climate resilience, resource competition, and strategic defense. So, not only does the Arctic Council need a reinvigoration in terms of cooperation and membership and member states being invested in the Arctic Council, but it also needs a rework in exactly how it functions and creating a forum for the security concerns to be aired. There's also been a lack of cooperation between member states after Russia's 2022 invasion of Ukraine. Seven Arctic Council member states suspended cooperation with Russia. Russia was ultimately kicked out of the Arctic Council, and because of that, Russia suspended any sort of financial contributions to the Arctic Council, which of course meant that the Arctic Council took a hit on the financial side of the things. Thus, the Arctic Council counterplan. Now, you read it, and the goal of the counterplan is to bolster the Arctic Council and to return the U.S. to full participation. So the counterplan has the United States increase its cooperation with the Arctic Council, support Russia's inclusion back into the Council, increase collaborative scientific research through the Council, develop a forum in the Arctic Council for security discussions, and cooperatively engage with other Arctic nations. So as you can see, this counterplan resolves a lot of the reasons why the Arctic Council is inefficient right now in the status quo. It increases United States cooperation, increases funding, it has Russia come back to the table and reinvigorates the Arctic Council, but most importantly, it develops a forum in the Arctic Council for security discussions to be discussed. So the thesis of the argument essentially is that the Arctic Council cooperation and multilateralism in the Arctic writ large is preferable to unilateral action in the Arctic by the United States. You really want to read this argument along with some hedge or unilateralism bad arguments, and you can also read it along with any sort of sphere of influence this has, like the Russia dissent or the China dissent. In short, the argument is that multilateralism in the Arctic and cooperation in the Arctic with member states and the Arctic Council is preferable to the United States doing any sort of Arctic exploration and or development itself. There's also a level of this argument that there's the United States action is key to bolster the credibility of the Arctic Council. Ultimately, if the United States isn't seen as a member who is contributing and supporting the Arctic Council, its effectiveness ultimately isn't there. There's also a Russian net benefit because cooperation in the Arctic serves as a launch pad for US-Russia cooperation, and inviting them back into the Arctic Council would serve as a launch pad for the United States and Russia to ultimately try to re-engage each other on security conflicts, which hasn't really happened over the past few years as a result of the Ukraine conflict. And most importantly on that point is that this is something that Russia is kind of actively asking for. So Russia says yes to the counter plan and wants to be involved in the Arctic Council because obviously the Arctic is so important to their geopolitical and strategic interests in the region. Finally, just the last sort of note on the counter plan is don't be afraid to read any sort of arguments for unilateralism fails, since that is offense for the counter plan. Ultimately, if you can prove that unilateralism fails, the affirmative's direct action without cooperation or any sort of multilateralism in the region, it can prove that that fails and is ineffective, is inefficient in the region. The counterplan is only bolstered by then becomes more effective and more efficient as an argument because you can make arguments that say that without multilateralism, there's absolutely no way that you can actually resolve things like climate change, biodiversity collapse, or even the security concerns in the Arctic. So I hope that gives a little bit of insight into the Arctic Council counterplan. If there's any other questions that people have about the Arctic Council counterplan, feel free to reach out. Reach out to Pocket Coach Academy, and we'd be more than happy to answer any sort of questions you might have. Thanks.